Hello everyone! You're watching Riddles for your channel. Death is an insanely tragic event that is mentioned as infrequently as possible. However, sometimes surprising events happen, and those who are already considered dead suddenly show signs of life. Because of the negligence of doctors or simply from unexpected circumstances, people could wake up in the morgue and even at their own funerals. That's what we're going to tell you about today. Number 1. In the Indian state of Odisha, a man woke up during his own funeral. The missing 55-year-old cattleman who had gone to graze goats was found in one of the pastures. He was lying on the ground and showed no signs of life. His relatives thought he was dead and arranged a funeral. As he was being lowered into the grave, the man suddenly turned his head. The unexpected resurrection caused panic in those gathered. The cattleman was immediately taken to the hospital. The medics believed that he did not die that day but lost consciousness due to a high fever. Number 2. Nancy Perez, who was 3 months pregnant, lost consciousness when she heard gunshots near her home. It was in the town of La Entrada. Her parents found Nancy foaming at the mouth and called the local priest, believing their daughter was possessed by evil spirits. The exorcism ritual resulted in the girl ceasing to show signs of life, and she was taken to a hospital where medics pronounced her dead. The day after Nancy's burial, her husband went to the cemetery and heard muffled cries and thumping noises from the grave. When the relatives opened the coffin, it turned out that Nancy was not dead. That the girl had been buried alive was evidenced by wounds on her arms that Nancy had received trying to get out of the coffin. According to relatives, the girl's body was warm. She was taken to the hospital, but eventually Nancy died. Number 3. In Lucknow, Uttar Pradesh, India, a man suddenly began moving during his own funeral. Furqan Mohammed, 20, was taken to a private hospital Friday, June 21st, after being involved in an accident. On Monday, June 24th, doctors told relatives that Furqan had died and released his body to them. The grief-stricken family began funeral preparations. During the funeral, as Furqan was being prepared for burial, relatives noticed him twitching. The man was immediately taken to another hospital and given medical attention. According to doctors, the man is in critical condition, but his brain is definitely alive. Number 4. An intoxicated resident of the Polish city Siemianowice was sent to the morgue, but he woke up and left for a party. The man was returning from a party after drinking a lot of alcohol and passed out on the street. A passerby called an ambulance, and the doctors arrived and pronounced him dead and sent him to the morgue. The morgue guard discovered the mistake. His attention was attracted by strange sounds coming from the cooling chamber. He pulled out the drawer and saw that the man was alive, shivering from the cold and asking for a blanket. Contrary to the doctor's advice, the man decided not to linger in the hospital. He got dressed, called a cab and told them to take his home. But on the way, he changed his mind and drove back to the party. According to him, the return from the dead should be toasted. Number 5. An elderly Brazilian woman, Maria das Dores de Conceição, regained consciousness 4 hours after doctors pronounced her dead. The 88-year-old woman woke up in a coffin at the funeral home where she had been sent from the hospital where she had been treated. Maria was pronounced dead on Wednesday, December 22nd, according to the Brazilian publication. According to medical documents, instruments did not register any activity of viral organs. The elderly woman was then sent to a funeral home. The woman came back to life at 8:30 p.m. that afternoon. She was immediately taken out of her coffin and sent back to the hospital. Number 6. An unusual story happened to an Egyptian waiter. Hamdi Al-Hafez Nubi woke up during his own funeral in front of his astonished relatives. However, they decided not to cancel the mourning ceremony, turning it into a celebration. An Egyptian from a village of Naga el-Siman felt ill at work. He lost consciousness. The doctors arrived and pronounced the 28-year-old man dead of a heart attack. According to Muslim tradition, the waiter would be buried that night. The family washed the body and began making funeral preparations. However, when the body was being placed in the coffin, the doctor who was to sign the death certificate noticed that the man's skin was warm. Then the doctor examined Nubi more closely and found that he was breathing. It took less than a minute to wake the man up. Help was then needed for Nubi's mother, who fainted upon learning that her son was alive. Number 7. A retired man from China's Jianlian country woke up at his own funeral, whereupon he sat down in his coffin and asked frightened relatives what was going on. The 75-year-old man has suffered a long period of weakness and, according to family testimony, has stopped breathing. As a result, the family thought he was dead and prepared a funeral. After the man awoke right during the morning ceremony, his children immediately pulled the man out of his coffin and, with apologies, put him back to bed. The pensioner is currently resting at home and eating porridge to regain his strength. Number 8. An 83-year-old resident of Ukraine, Ksenia Diduk, was pronounced dead and then alive. The doctors who arrived by ambulance recorded the absence of a pulse and stated the patient's death. Relatives of the pensioner began to prepare funeral arrangements, but 10 hours later, the pensioner woke up. The relatives had to call an ambulance again to record their resurrection. Doctors took Diduk to intensive care. Now her condition has stabilized. The medics called the case unique. Number 9. In Vladivostok, a drunken man woke up in the morgue and barely managed to shout through the guard. The day before, he had been drinking with friends. After another drink, he lost consciousness and fell on the floor. His friends called an ambulance, the doctors pronounced him dead and took him to the morgue. It would seem that nothing unusual, but it turned out that the man was alive, just very drunk. The refrigerator had a sobering effect. The patient woke up, realized where he was, and began pounding on the door and screaming. He would have frozen to the death if it hadn't been for the night watchman who was making her rounds and heard the noise. The guard reported the strange sounds to the paramedics on duty. They did not believe her at first, but called the police to check it out. The police officers took the man out of the cold room. They warmed him up, treated him, interviewed him and left him go home. The local police department said. The man even made it to his own wake. Number 10. A Gloucestershire postman has been described as a miracle man when he came back to life 21 minutes after being declared dead. 10 years ago, João Araujo suffered a cardiac arrest while waiting to give his wife a lift to work. The 48-year-old was rushed to Gloucestershire Royal Hospital, where medical staff spent 6 hours trying to revive him. After their attempts had seemingly failed, Mr. Araujo was declared dead at approximately 4 p.m. on Saturday, April 18, 2009. But as nurses were transporting Mr. Araujo's body to the mortuary, they noticed some movement 21 minutes after he had died. Doctors subsequently discovered Mr. Araujo had a pulse and he was placed in a coma for 3 days. Doctors believed that Joao's brain would be significantly damaged after such an oxygen deprivation, but their fears were unfounded. The letter carrier is healthy and living a normal life. Thumbs up, subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you won't miss our latest videos.